Yeah, Kevin. Hello. How are you once again? And first of all, thank you very much for coming at a short notice and just you have given your so valuable time. It's really very nice and a pleasurable moment for us. Kevin, my name is Manu Pratap. Really like your artwork, like what you did in your Trophies of War. It's really an amazing and magnificent work you have done. So I thought let me discuss myself with Kevin to a few points and what I have running into my mind about this thing. Kevin, would you please introduce yourself so audience will get to know you well?
Franchises such as Battlefield, Resident Evil, Sleeping Dogs, Plants vs Zombies for a bunch of years, and then currently I work at Riot Games on Valorant.
Well, very good, very good. Like these are so promising to play titles. That's so
Yeah, I've
amazing.
been pretty fortunate through my career.
So, how long have you been into the industry, Kevin?
Yeah, I want to say around just over 10 years.
Okay.
I started back in 2011, initially in motion capture. And then I want to say maybe 6 months later, I kind of got my first environment gig at a studio working on Resident Evil, and then shortly after that, kind of just jumped around from a few studios before I stayed at EA for I want to say 10 years almost or 9 years, and then I had a short stint after I left EA at Offworld Industries as a lead there for about a year, and then recently this past year I joined Riot Games as a senior environment artist.
Kevin, can I ask you one thing? Like, how did you get to decide like you should go with Trophies of War? Because this is a really very complex, and I read the story about this one. Like, as I told you, like we heard a story related to Trophies of War occurred in the past, which is Ossuary of Custoza in Italy, and it holds the remains of more than 4,000 soldiers. And we read about it like bones of 800 martyrs on display at there. And can you please tell me what are these crowns in your artwork trying to depict?
Okay, yeah.
And we are really curious to know the story behind the Trophies of War inside your brain.
Yeah, I think initially when I started the project, the initial goal was just to kind of practice organic sculpting, and so I decided I really wanted to just make a skull, a human skull. And initially, when I started that, as I kind of, I guess, got my feet wet creating it, um, I started gathering more references
Mm-hmm.
and started finding designs like tattoo designs and other uh, unique kind of just pieces, kind of going through sites like Pinterest and Google. And then eventually, I found this tattoo design that kind of it showed a bunch of skulls all strapped together. And I really wasn't sure I didn't really realize I was going to drastically raise the scope of the project. But eventually, I kind of thought, okay, well, maybe I could reuse these skulls and I could kind of piece it together. And so I didn't really have a story for it at first. And over the course of the entire project, eventually it started feeling like, okay, well, maybe this was, a bunch of kings that had been, defeated over a bunch of battles over a crusade or something like that. And then I think I ran into a few obstacles along the way because I think initially it was just supposed to be, like I said, one piece, but idea after idea, and then next thing you know, it's just become this massive character piece that took me quite a while actually to finish off, and it was actually pretty challenging over the course of the year or so that I was working on it. But eventually, the project's original name used to be called Fallen Kings,
Fallen Kings.
but
Okay.
yeah, initially, and then I eventually, probably, maybe a month before I was going to present it, I kind of changed the name because I just felt like Trophies of War just kind of became something that felt more because it was like it was kind of almost metaphorical because it was like a trophy of mine because I'd been like through a war trying to finish the thing. But yeah, kind
Yeah,
of how it
because
started, I guess.
yes, yes, and because I've seen like the crowns of Queen and King and Jack, they're holding together because different kind of crowns, and one skull is not wearing a crown, so like
Yep.
it has a
Well,
chain, it
actually,
has a hereditary chain kind of stuff. Like,
yeah, actually, that piece initially, it did have a circlet at the original or that skull piece at the very bottom.
Mm-hmm.
Initially, it did have it, and then I was going through a mentorship with a friend, and we were kind of like looking at the piece and figuring out a way, like how could we make this much more interesting, and how could we kind of spice up the visual quality of it. And so actually, I had to make a decision to actually remove one of the crowns initially from it, and because I wanted to try something where it was more tribal like at the very bottom, and that's what I ended up doing. Actually, it was kind of cutting back on certain things and removing actually some assets, because initially I had, in the initial piece, I had a few more things that were a part of it, but it was just kind of becoming, I don't want to say visually distracting, but I think maybe just too much on the piece. Like I had hair at one point on some of them, and it became too much to do, and so I ended up having to scope back, and I think it ended up being much more visually stronger because of that. So
Okay. And it's a question just right now. I'm getting in my mind. Like, how long did this art took you to plan and just to present, and like from starting to end, like from your maybe you were getting what I mean to say, like
yeah.
in your brain you're getting the things like, okay, I will go with this thing, and the depiction, the end part, the presentation. How long will it take?
I mean, it's hard to fully say the actual time. Like, this isn't a production asset, far as I'm concerned. Like, we wouldn't be given, if I was working at a studio job, the amount of time to actually complete it. Like, initially, I think I started it, I want to say almost 2 years ago, possibly might even be longer, because I was working on stream. I used to do a lot of art streaming, and so initially I had started the project on Twitch, and then my career got really busy, and I was having trouble like just getting to do portfolio work because of studio work. And then eventually, I would say, like, I had kind of an epiphany at one point on the project when I thought I was going to post it. Probably about a year or so ago. A year ago, I think. I was going to post it, and I had some great feedback from a friend, and it kind of changed me on how I wanted to take the project. And so then eventually I redid I think I redid all the texturing. I redid all the ropes like 3 times, and then I redid all the webs, because I was really trying to push the quality bar, and it became kind of more of a almost honestly a personal project of just redoing work over and over again, trying to just raise the quality bar and continue to learn and grow. And you know what, like, which is in hindsight, like, kind of frustrating, because like most pieces, you'll get bored of if you work longer than 3 months
Yeah,
on something.
it happens.
But
Yes.
yeah, and I kind of burnt out on the project, I want to say, like 3 or 4 times, and started like four other like pieces. Like, I think I have another environment, another weapon, and a whole bunch of other assets that I kind of, just to get my mind off it and then come back to it. So it eventually almost got at one point kind of abandoned. But in terms of the time, I'd say, like, it took me probably 6 months to get it to the point where I was going to post it, and then
Wow.
eventually, like, just in my evenings, not like, I wouldn't say like
Yeah.
production time though, right? Like, it's just
Because
an hour
yes,
here, 2 hour there, so
I got it. You
um
just work
way longer.
identify it. Yeah.
Yeah,
So
way
can
longer than
imagine.
I would ever be given.
Yeah, yeah. But the result,
Yeah.
the quality, we can see it's really promising. Like I can see the
Yeah. Oh
details and all
yeah.
these things. It's really very nice. And
Like, if I was to oh, go ahead, sorry.
yes. Yours. Yeah, please.
Yeah, I would say, like, if I was to do it again, obviously it would be like no time at all now, compared, because there's like a lot of it was learning and exploration, right? So
Yes.
yeah.
It happens
Go ahead
when
though.
we work on our personal project. It happens because we are trying to push the limits. That's why we are doing the personal projects, because what we are keeping in
100%.
mind, because we have to gain, we have to cross our limits, we have to cross the learning level which we had gained in the past life. So that's why it takes time. So it happens with our personal project. I totally understand that thing. And even one more question is that, like, did you do it from the scratch, or you have a library of assets and textures which helps to speed up the process? Like sometimes we can use the skulls like you
Um
sculpted a long time back, and you thought like, okay, I'm gonna use
yeah.
this thing right now, or I'm gonna use this lock and just these textures. Like, I mean, what I mean to say?
Yeah, no, 100%. Yeah, I think, like, when I started out, I mean, it's all from scratch. for the most part. Like I had a reference skull that I used where I would look at that, but I would still sculpt in ZBrush my own skull. So I would have a 3D asset in ZBrush, but just using it as a 3D reference. That was of a photo scan of a skull, but I would never use the skull because I want, like, the whole point was to actually, get better at creating that particular asset.
Yes.
In terms of materials and textures, obviously I use Substance Painter, but none of it was any smart materials or anything. Everything's like own custom materials. Even the ropes and everything, that's all made from scratch in Substance Designer. I think the jewels or the initial gemstones, there's actually a pack that I just downloaded online that's just actually cut stones because I just didn't want to actually model it. Because even though it's easy to do, it saved me time, and it's just a gem. So I ended up using that pack, and then I'm pretty sure that's about it. Like, everything is all from scratch or default Substance Painter base materials that I would just then layer on top of with my own details, textures, and paint. So yeah.
Yeah. Kevin, just if I see the props you have done, they are brilliantly done. Like I would once more say magnificently done. But can you please
Appreciate it.
elaborate? Yeah, the things the strands you put into the props. How did you do that? That because I can see the strands into the props. Did
Yeah.
you use the mesh or some kind of planes, like planar planes kind of
Oh, there's
techniques?
a bunch of tricks. So initially, I had a lot of just like floating cards and stuff like that, and
Okay,
I was
play
running
cards
into
and
this
all.
problem where, pardon?
Play cards and all. Like we used to we
Yeah,
do
they
in
play
here. Yeah, hand
hand
planes.
placed
Okay,
alpha cards. Yeah,
okay.
so kind of like how if you ever done vegetation or anything like that, it's just
Mm-hmm.
all placed alphas. And then what I did was I created kind of a outer shell that
Mm-hmm.
follows the ropes, and that actually has the rest of the rope spiraling around it to kind of create the volume.
Mm-hmm.
And so everything's, and then there's like a strip on, I think there's 4 strips that follow each rope that is more alpha work. So it's kind of like a whole alpha atlas. But eventually, like, once I had the project all assembled, and I'm like, okay, well, I'm kind of raising the caliber of it where to the point where it's kind of not even technically runtime. So eventually, to get the ropes to be able to be as detailed as I wanted to, I actually just put displacement on it because I was kind of struggling with it to not look what I would call gamey, is a term that we use sometimes, where
Mm-hmm.
you would see too much geometry, or sorry, the facets of the geometry, and everything was just becoming more high res. So that was kind of like what I ended up doing with it. But the trick, like the card strips and the cone shell that runs around it, or the shell that runs across each rope, is all still there. Like, it's all to fake kind of more that ratty or torn, frayed feel.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So I ended up
Okay.
actually redoing the ropes. I want to say like 3 times because I was really struggling with getting it to get this
Because they are the
um
really main
just
part to show
torn
the
feel.
reality. Like yeah.
Yeah, and
Because
age.
you're holding everything just with the rope, so it should look like a
Yeah,
strand is attaching to the rope, like there's some kind of strand and pulling power. Okay,
it took
and
forever to place too.
yeah, yeah, of course, and it looks like a production render, not a gamey kind of stuff. That's really good, like using. How did you plan for the rendering presentation? And was there a specific goal to achieve? Like any kind of plans
So
to? Yeah, sure.
yeah, initially, I was using Marmoset 3
Mm-hmm.
initially, but eventually Marmoset 4 came out, and I was like, okay, well, I want to try ray tracing out. So I moved the project towards that, which kind of changed how I was going to light it. Because initially, I was kind of doing a bit more stylistic
Mm-hmm.
lighting in Marmoset 3 with the raster render. But once I moved it to ray tracing, there were things that I kind of liked about it. And it was a little bit challenging to get used to because I'm not used to using ray tracing at all. So that was kind of something I had to kind of learn and figure out. Kind of in terms of lighting goals, at least, like I wanted it to feel really dramatic. And so I was looking at a lot of like Rembrandt and other kind of painterly artists. Of paintings, I'd say, like Renaissance paintings and things like that,
Mm-hmm.
that were just
Yeah.
dark feeling. And I was trying to figure out how could I make this feel more dramatic. So just mostly using just a strong key light, and then having a little bit of just point light bounces to try to keep a little bit of light, but still have the main key light be the most contrasting part.
Okay. And like in the meantime, like while you are busy with your project, are you getting regular critiques from seniors or colleagues or peers while in the process? Like,
Oh yeah, all the time. Like I'm not shy at all of sharing my work with anybody. So I have a lot of friends that I kind of trust to show these kind of things to, because a lot of times, like if you just show it to anybody, you're just gonna get tons and tons of artists critiquing it and giving their own kind of art director feedback. And I've had that in the past where you get feedback from groups and it's like 30 people commenting, and it kind of puts things in a different direction all over the place. So I kind of have a few specific individuals that I prefer to get feedback for this kind of thing, that their eyes, they've been in either the industry for 10 plus years or whatever. So they have a lot stronger critical eye.
yeah.
And they're not going to tell me that it looks good. They're going to point out all the flaws. So, cause like, what can be really frustrating is like when you post something, and everybody wants a pat on the back when they post something and tell you if it looks good or not. But when you're trying to improve something, it's kind of the last thing you want to hear is this looks great. You're like, I want you to point out the problems so that I can fix it or improve on it.
Yes, yeah. Because the critics all they all matters like when you're working in your piece, because you're again pushing the limit, so you need the feedbacks, and the feedback is really important to grow your artwork. And because like it's good when your peers say you directly that, this point is getting wrong, man, you have to just fix this thing, this is not working with the your setup and your team, so you have to fix this thing, and it makes your art more charming.
Yeah, 100%. I think also too, like, um, it helps you train your eye to just be able to, and just to be able to analyze your work better as well, right? So I think like getting peer feedback is always essential to improve, because if you don't get any of it, or you're just looking for someone to tell you if it looks good or chase likes, it doesn't really help you improve, right? So I think like for at least a few people that I send these to, generally, like they're generally, a lot of them are principal artists in the industry, and so they're always kind of helping me push myself, and because that's something that I eventually want to kind of chase, I'd say. So it helps me train my eye further and improve my just being able to call out things and understand what's wrong and what's right with things.
Uh-huh. Kevin, if possible, can you please walk through your texture maps? Like, for instance, roughness and metallic, because the work in the roughness and metallic is too good, because I can see the roughness in the skull. It's marvelous in the raw. I can see even like your skull is having too much details. So, if possible for you, can you share us the roughness and the metalness map so we can share with the community like how this things has been worked up and how this guy has planned all this
Oh, like,
stuff?
are you referring to the actual?
Only the
'Cause I
screenshots,
do
like
have
just screenshots.
I do have
Because it helps to understand the things because what's going on behind the mind, because roughness, as you know, in PBR theory, roughness is really matters a lot while when you are just taking a light onto your assets, because the light is hitting on and calculating everything according to your roughness map and the metallic map. So it's it,
I
it
do have a still in the presentation at the very bottom where it showcases roughness and metallic and all that, albedo and normal, all on each different stills.
okay,
Um,
then we'll
you
take a
scroll
look.
down to the bottom. If you need me to send you something, I can definitely do that for sure.
Yeah.
If that's what you're referring to. Are you referring to just seeing each individual texture map? Yeah, I mean, with this piece, like one of the biggest goals was to kind of really push my texturing with it, and like I ended up doing a mentorship on one piece of it actually with a friend. I don't know if you're aware of Josh Lynch's work. So I went through his mentorship, and my whole goal was to kind of really get more contrast between materials, and trying to identify with many areas, like how do I really get them to read amongst each other, because a lot of times when you do, it can be really easy to kind of screw up PBR and have things look too much the
Yes.
same, right? And so sometimes you have to push things a little further, like it might be a little shinier here just so that it doesn't match another material as close to it. So, and
Yes.
it's just a lot of, honestly, a lot of well, actually, one thing I'd say that I do is I'll sometimes take a value shift where take it into Photoshop and just take a 128 grayscale and then change it to color over top of it, just so that I can see the how much value things are. So, because like if you take, for example, a hue saturation, just make it black and white, you're actually not seeing true value. And so that's like one of the things I use a lot to really help kind of push my values of the texturing. Because if you don't do that, you'll end up like say painting with a blue or a red or something like that. Let's just say that, and they actually might be, or a yellow, and the yellow actually might be darker than the blue, even though the yellow looks brighter, right? So kind of just like a lot of color theory principles behind that. But that was kind of one thing I kind of really prioritized, is just making sure that I don't go too dark or don't go too bright in spots. In terms of the roughness and metal.
Yes.
Oh, go ahead.
Keeping the things subtle.
Yeah. It's just a lot of times. I mean, even in previous work that I've done, like sometimes I'll have things just too saturated or just not in the right range. So it's always keeping a PBR validator as well in my Substance Painter files, just making sure I'm in check. So.
Yeah, Kevin, your like spider web, as you know, maybe in the community, a lot of people have been commented like this is looking so marvelous.
Oh gosh, yeah, a lot.
I know that because they are looking so damn cool. So can you please share some techniques and tricks for this one? Because I hope you have used the planes.
There was a lot of tricks. That is actually probably one of the hardest parts of the project, because trying to just get them to not look terrible. A lot of it was shape design and trying to get that to work, because placing everything around, sometimes I would run into silhouette issues because I created an atlas. But the way that I made it was I initially started with just kind of a brush pack that I found online just for Photoshop. And I was just kind of playing with that. And then I ended up finding a Substance Designer node, I think on Gumroad, that allowed me to kind of create just base spider webs. And so I would use those to generate the full spider web meshes, if that makes sense. Because there's spider webs and then there's cobwebs. And then once I had an atlas of that, I would then take it into Photoshop, try a bunch of stuff in there, just painting over to try to get an alpha that worked. And then I tried some other methods with a ZBrush tool that I found, where I could actually string out webbing between a point and another point, and then bake that down as an alpha. So I was trying like all sorts of things, and eventually I think I settled on there was a UE4 pack that's a game engine that I actually like game engine asset that I use, and I kind of like hybrided that and kit bash things together there and just try and painted over stuff and just try to get the feel of it, because a lot of it I found I was running into instances where I was just having too many webs that weren't being useful, I'd say. Because as I started placing it around the mesh, I started running into a situation where maybe only 4 or 5 were actually good, and the other like 20 on the atlas just were useless. Other things that I found useful were kind of creating these like long strand ones that I could just kind of hook into or attach to one point to another point on the asset, just to kind of create more visual interest. But yeah, it's kind of a bit of a mess of how they were constructed, honestly, because there's just a lot of learning and a lot of fixing. And
placement is so nice, man. Really, Kevin.
Yeah.
Like I would say, like the placement of the webs is too damn cool, and everything is like planes. The alpha on the planes. Or did you use some kind of mesh also, like somewhere?
No, they're all just planes.
Planes only.
They might have maybe.
So cool.
Oh, go ahead.
The placement are so cool. Like the way you place them to show the story is really, and the lock I can see on the lock, like it's looking so like the placement on the lock is really very mind blowing.
Yeah, no, like everything gets hand placed. I actually felt like I was being a hair artist the entire time. Just I've had friends that do that, where they dress around a character model, and yeah, it takes forever. Like I had looked into some tools, but I think I didn't really want that procedural look. I really wanted to get kind of a handcrafted, like every area has to be kind of silhouetted. And I want to say like I probably did it three times, because eventually I did one pass and it just wasn't working. And then I changed the atlas, and I had to kind of re-UV map things and move things around. But yeah, it's probably where I spent the most time was just on the web placement and the actual rope cards, just to kind of get the frayed feel and the I guess the set dressing, honestly, of the asset. It just took forever, but yeah, it was worth it.
Yeah, it's really. And Kevin, which part of your work did you pay the most attention to? Like maybe you discovered it very tricky to execute and consume most of the time. Maybe it could be modeling, sculpting, the lighting, texturing, whatever it could be. Maybe you're planning something.
Yeah, I mean, it's a bit of everything, I think, honestly. Initially, like I feel like the asset has certain stages of what were hard and what were easier, of things that were more familiar.
Mm-hmm.
You know, in like the initial phase, it was okay. Well, how do I make a skull? Okay, figure that out. And then it's like, okay, well, how do I make these crowns? And the crowns were actually the easiest part until I had to get to the gem rendering and then figuring out how to get the refractions and all that to work well with that. And then it was okay, how do I figure out these webs? How do I figure out these ropes, right? So they all kind of had their own battle at certain stages where it was just unfamiliar to territory for me as an artist. Because generally, like, I work as an environment artist, right? And so this is kind of more character art than environment art, to be honest. Like ideal, like on Valorant, for example, I'm creating trim sheets and stylized textures. So like this is nothing even remotely like what I do normally. So when I try to do like personal work, I'm always trying to challenge myself in generally a lot of areas that I've never done before. I think like moving forward, I want to more focus on smaller things where I can kind of be more intentional as opposed to like trying to level up so many different areas of my skills. But yeah, I think like if I was to pick the hardest thing, I think it was just everything is unique. And so the whole asset is every part is a hero prop, right? And so that was kind of the biggest undertaking, is each piece could technically be put aside and made into its own portfolio piece, right? The main goal was just to have a asset that could really like resonate and stand alone on ArtStation. Because initially when I started, I was like, yeah. Initially when I started, I thought, you know, they used to have the ArtStation picks that used to be back in the day, and I was like, oh, I really want to make an ArtStation pick, and then they removed it. So while I was doing that, so this is kind of, I guess, my own way of making a pick that's not a pick.
Yeah. Even the competition is really very good. Like the competition, I think from my perspective, the competition is really, really, really tough. Like how you're gonna place all those things to present a story. That's what I think is truly taking time from my perspective. Kevin, few people are juniors in the community, as you know that. Any advice would you offer to them or newcomers? Like what sort of struggles does benefit them to move forward or to get hired by a AAA studios?
Oh gosh, yeah, that's a big question.
Yeah, that's really big.
I could spend an hour talking about that. Yeah, I think like I mean, it's every like younger artist or less experienced artist is always at different stages too, and everyone's has different problems they kind of run into trying to get jobs or get, I guess, recognition in the community to their portfolio. I think like for me, like one of the biggest ones is to work on stuff that you really like to work on, because you'll be motivated about it and it'll help you craft your portfolio. But at the same time, recognize like when you're making your portfolio, you still want to kind of aim wide, where you want to make content that several studios will want to hire for. So like if you're working on, say, like a realistic asset as an example, it might be that you're working on something that is very similar to a certain type of content that a studio produces, right? And that'll help you get noticed because they'll see your work and go, oh, this will totally work in our game. But you don't want to do just like exact fan art or replicate the exact same piece as somebody's, you know, portfolio or something like that. I think like so for example, if they do stylized work, you don't want to just say, I'm just going to do Blizzard style art, because then you're limiting your options of just working at only one place, right? You want to do some work that can still have more range. So
Yes.
maybe you'll get picked up by, you know, what are they called? Airship Syndicate or Riot or several other stylized studios, right? So it's like you just don't want to basically box yourself in. Still do what you like, but don't box yourself in.
Mm-hmm.
I guess like another things too, like just be patient because like it takes a long time to get
It
good
takes a
at
long
this
time.
stuff,
Yes.
and a lot of artists I know they always want to just do it now. They want to they want to get the job immediately, and they have hardly made anything.
Mm-hmm.
And it's even talking to many juniors that I've worked with in the past, and even when they get their foot in the door, they're always like, I want to be senior, and it's like
Mm-hmm.
you haven't even been doing this a year yet, or they say things like, I want to be an art director
Mm-hmm.
and or an art lead, and it's like they don't realize what that role actually means. So I think
Mm-hmm.
it's just like, don't be afraid to just keep getting more experience.
Yes, yes, yes. And even that's the main reason that people get impatient, but art only deserve the
Hmm.
patience. So you have to be
Oh, it
very
takes time,
patient.
right?
Yeah, it takes time really, and it takes
Hmm.
time, admiration, creativity, good mentors. A lot of things
Yep.
matters to become a good artist. It's not just by using just you are portraying something, because I have seen in community people try to like, if I'm gonna say about 3D or any concept kind of stuff, they try to imitate the artwork what the people are doing. They don't try to create their
Yeah. Yeah.
own. But to be a creative person, they should follow up their brain. They should have to create something new so they can learn more, and they can make their own platform or a podium into the community.
Yeah, I mean, I think one thing sometimes, like as much as this craft is a bit at times it can be a trade,
Mm-hmm.
in a way where you're just making specific content for a specific request, right? Whether it be some asset for a game or a movie or whatever.
Mm-hmm.
Um, but sometimes you kind of forget that we are trying to make art. So there's always there's a fine line, and you always have to kind of walk both of them at the time. So
At the
there's the
time,
business
yeah.
side, and then there's the artistic side.
Yes, 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 yes. Kevin, if we skip anything important, please take a step further, and you may please to elaborate those things. We appreciate your time for that, because I
Oh
heard
yeah.
from, yeah. Yes, please.
Oh, go ahead. Go ahead.
You go ahead. Yeah, just I said like, if you skip anything important and you think that this might be something for the community which you can share with us, please go ahead.
Oh gosh. It's kind of open ended, but yeah, I don't know. I mean, like overall, like this, I don't know. This project's been it was pretty liberating finally when I finished it because it kind of it tore me up pretty much trying to finish it over the years because I think a lot had gone through my career while I was trying to kind of accomplish it. Just leaving different studios, joining different things, meeting new people. The whole pandemic hitting while I was
Mm-hmm.
working on this, like uh, working as a lead, leaving that job,
Mm-hmm.
going to a different studio, going to Riot. And so it's like it's interesting. Like it's just been almost like a journey of
Mm.
my life in the span of that 2 years or whatever. So like I can kind of look back and be proud of it. But I think at the time when I was working on it, I was pretty frustrated because it was taking forever. And
Haha.
I think sometimes like raising the quality bar, there's a lot of diminishing returns that can kind of happen, right? And I think when I was near the end of this, I didn't think it would do well at all online, especially. I wasn't sure how it was going to do because you get kind of all you see is the flaws,
Yeah.
right?
Yes.
When in
Yes.
your work before you're about to post it. So I think now, especially seeing how it's like resonated with many artists in the community and other media outlets and other things, like it's been really interesting to see. Like I'm proud of it, if that makes sense, which is hard to. It's sometimes like we're never proud of our work. So
Yeah.
I'm pretty glad that it's all over and I can move on to cool things now but still look back and be like, oh, okay, yeah, that was a lot of work.
That is.
So yeah.
So, by this answer, I got a question to ask. If I would say you right now, anything you want to fix up in your Trophies of War, what would you like to do?
Oh gosh. So many things. There's like gem renders I wish I did better at. There's certain web placements that I see the problems where they make shapes that I don't want them to do, and I want to go
Uh-huh.
back and fix it. But at certain points, it's like I don't care anymore. I've had actually even the top part of it. There's a spear, and I
Mm-hmm.
hardly show it off in the presentation. and there's like tons of detail there. But eventually, I was actually struggling to present it in certain ways to make the shots interesting. Because each shot, I think there's probably like, if I was to load up the Marmoset file, like 50 to 60 cameras
Oh,
of different shots and so like only like maybe 17 got chose, right? So there's like, even on the presentation, I probably would prune it back because it's a lot.
mhm.
So there's a lot of things like
Yeah.
I had moments where, like I said, I really wanted to explore hair and have like some of the skulls kind of rotting, and so like hair partially all it, like long hair for the
Ah,
characters. I had like, thoughts of that. Like there were so many things that I think I really wanted to do, but in terms of polish, but eventually you gotta kind of put the pencil down, right? So
yeah.
yeah,
Because there's something has to be end, like, because it's
yeah.
almost
If
took
if
6 months as you
anything,
told.
yeah, if anything for me, I'm like I really like, this was a huge push in my presentation skills. That was kind of the thing that took the longest time because it was just redoing so much work and trying to get things to look right and understand what looks good. If anything, like I would just keep improving on the presentation. It's just something I really enjoy. So yeah.
Kevin, from our side, we are done. We are almost done, man. And it's really nice talking to you and getting
Yeah,
so
no
many
problem.
ideas. Even today, I got to learn something like from you, like the designer part you did with the web and the placement of the webs.
Hmm.
It's really very natural, which quite inspiring for me.
Handcrafted.
And so, and I hope we covered all the questions which relates to the community, which from our side, it's I think we are almost done. And anything you want to say? Like,
Oh no, thanks for having me. Yeah, it's been a joy talking about it and my story
s-
with it at least.
same
Mhm.
pleasure here, and it's immense pleasure to us. Like we got you to in our circle and just to discuss this kind of piece of artwork, which is really true is like magnificent piece of work.
Thank you. Yeah. Yeah,
And
look,
that's
I'm looking forward to the next things I get to do.
yeah, sure. Then we will call you back. Okay,
Cool.
Kevin.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Have a
And
great
thanks for
rest
the
of your
time.
day.
Seriously, thanks for the time.
Yeah,
Thank
no
you.
problem. No problem.
Okay.
Take care,
Take
both of you.
care. You too, man.
Cheers. Take care.